The Age of Iron and the Long War, the turbulent fate of the Imperium of Man, with the end of the reign of Drakan Vangerich, Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum, the Imperium of Man, led by the reformed High Lords Council, stepped into an era later known as the Age of Iron in the mid to late 32nd millennium. Universally recognized as another golden age for humanity since the conclusion of the horusheresy, this period emerged from the ashes of crisis, forged by resilience and military might. The Beast Wars had laid bare the Imperium's critical lack of military strength, a flaw that was ruthlessly addressed during the subsequent recovery. Legions were reinforced, armories restocked, and tactics refined. While the success of the fourth founding of the Astartes brought hundreds of new Space Marine chapters into the Imperium's fold, their gene seed pure and their resolve unshakable, ready to defend humanity's scattered worlds. During the Age of Iron, the Imperium cemented its control across the galaxy. Numerous astropathic sanctums, beacons of Terra's authority, were erected on worlds spanning every segmentum, their psychers channeling orders and warnings through the turbulent tides of the warp. Fortress worlds and deep space navy bases rose like iron sentinels at strategic choke points, their cannons and void shields standing guard against the darkness beyond. The ecclesiarchy, weakened by the Beast Wars, had become more manageable. No longer a runaway force, it served as a tool of social cohesion under Terra's watchful eye. The Imperium, much like during the Great Crusade, turned its attention to the Xenos and Chaos threats that had festered in the chaos of leadership vacuum. While humanity clashed with the Ork, Wah! During the Beast Wars, Chaos had never ceased its incursions into real space. The traitorous humans, once driven into the eye of terror, lingered in the warp's twisted depths, forging new pacts with the dark gods, pacts of blood, corruption, and eternal servitude. The surviving primarchs of the traitor legions ascended to become immortal daemon princes, their once human forms twisted by the warp's malice, their minds consumed by hatred for the Imperium they had abandoned. In the lawless expanse of the Eye of Terror, the traitor Space Marine warbands, untethered from their primarch's control, descended into brutal civil war. Bound by conflicting worship of the dark gods and clashing ideologies, Chaos worshippers fought tooth and nail over the Well of Eternity and other scarce resources within the Eye. These conflicts shattered once cohesive legions into warring factions, as the discipline and hierarchy inherited from the Imperium dissolved beneath the weight of unbridled desire. No longer bound by duty or order, countless Chaos Space Marines abandoned their parent legions, forming warbands that operated as independent warlords, each pursuing their own twisted ambitions. Yet even as they plotted against one another, their hatred for the Imperium burned brighter than ever, a relentless fire stoked by centuries of resentment and warp-induced madness. The Eye of Terror, the largest rift between real space and the warp, was heavily garrisoned by the Imperium, its borders patrolled by battle fleets and Astartes chapters. Denied open access to the galaxy, Chaos warbands turned to smaller, hidden warp rifts, fissures in reality that allowed them to slip into real space undetected. There they unleashed their fury upon the descendants of those who had defeated them, ravaging imperial worlds, slaughtering civilians, and spreading corruption wherever they went. Over time, the traitors' tactics grew more insidious. Imperial ships corrupted by the warp during their journeys were deliberately released back into real space, becoming vectors for chaos cults and heretical propaganda. Chaos missionaries infiltrated imperial worlds, sowing dissent and inciting rebellion, turning loyal citizens against the Imperium. Even the virtues of strength and glory were twisted into seeds of corruption, whispered into the ears of once loyal Space Marines, temptations that occasionally proved too strong to resist, leading to chapter betrayals that shook the Imperium to its core. But the greatest threat from Chaos came not from scattered raids or secret cults, but from the Chaos champions, warriors chosen by the dark gods to unite the fractious traitor forces. A Chaos champion's power was such that it could temporarily set aside ancient feuds, rally broken warbands under a single banner, and forge an unstable alliance of chaosspacemarines, mortal cultists, chaos titans, dark mechanicum, forge worlds, and even daemons spilled forth from the warp. Leading this unholy host, the champion would storm out of the Eye of Terror, launching a Black Crusade, a full-scale invasion of the Imperium, intended to burn humanity's empire to the ground. When speaking of Black Crusades, one name stands above all others: Abaddon the Despoiler, heir to the War Master Horus and the most notorious traitor in the galaxy. Once the first captain of the X-15 Legion, the sons of Horus, Ezekiel Abaddon, had been shattered by Horus's death at the hands of the Emperor. He abandoned his brothers, wandering the deepest reaches of the Eye of Terror, his spirit broken by the failure of the heresy. But while he wandered, the sons of Horus, first to retreat from Terror after the heresy, became the target of every other traitor, Legion's wrath. In their leaderless state, they were powerless to defend themselves, and in a brutal conflict with the Emperor's children, even Horus's own corpse was stolen. The vile Fabius Bile, chief apothecary of the Emperor's children, sought to clone the fallen War Master, using his gene seed to create a twisted facsimile of Horus. This act filled the sons of Horus with revulsion, but without a leader they could not retaliate. Desperate, the remaining members of the Legion tracked down Abaddon, begging him to return. When Abaddon learned of his Primarch's desecration, grief and rage ignited a new fire within him. He returned to the sons of Horus, vowing to avenge Horus's honor and forge a new path for the traitor Legion. Leading an assault on Fabius Bile's cruiser, Abaddon and his warriors failed to kill the mad apothecary, but they discovered something far more horrifying: clones of all 20 Primarchs, including Horus. With cold resolve, Abaddon ordered the destruction of these abominations. As the clone of Horus died, it briefly recognized Abaddon, whispering of their past bond, but the first captain's response was cold: "I am no longer your son." With this act, Abaddon severed the Legion's ties to its failed past, renaming the Sons of Horus the Black Legion. His vision was not to repeat Horus's mistakes. He would wield the power of the warp, but never submit to its corruption. This unyielding will caught the eye of the dark gods, who bestowed upon him their dark blessings, enhanced strength, resilience, and access to warp-fueled weapons that made him nearly unbeatable on the battlefield. Thus began the legend of Abaddon the Despoiler. By the end of the Age of Iron, in the 35th millennium, Abaddon had launched 4 Black Crusades, each bringing untold devastation to the Imperium. Though none succeeded in toppling humanity's empire, each crusade achieved its strategic goals, seizing ancient artifacts, destroying key imperial strongholds, and sowing chaos that weakened the Imperium's grip on the galaxy. The Imperium paid a terrible price for each victory, with billions dead, worlds burned, and entire battle fleets lost to the void. For Abaddon and his followers, this conflict was known as the Long War, a perpetual struggle that began with the Horus heresy and would end only with the Imperium's total destruction. The Imperium, in turn, fought back with unwavering faith in the Emperor and coordinated military might, defending both real space and the souls of humanity against the Chaos onslaught. Against all odds, the Age of Iron saw humanity not only survive, but thrive, its empire stronger and more united than it had been since the Great Crusade. The military and administrative infrastructure built during this era would endure for millennia, serving the Imperium well into the 41st millennium. Since its earliest days, the Imperium-of-Man had divided the galaxy into 5 segmentums, each governed by a regional command structure. The segmentum Solar, home to Holy Terror, the Imperium's capital and the Emperor's golden throne, served as the heart of humanity's empire, its worlds, the most prosperous and heavily defended. To the north lay the segmentum Obscurus, the front line against chaos, where the Eye of Terror loomed like a malignant storm, and Astartes chapters such as the Dark Angels and Black Templars fought endless battles against traitor warbands and daemons. The segmentum Pacificus, to the west, was a vast expanse of unexplored space, its worlds often isolated and vulnerable to chaos raids and Xenos incursions. To the south, the segmentum Tempistus was plagued by Xenos threats, ork YRs, tyranid hive fleets, and crafty eldar raiders, while the segmentum Ultima to the east was the largest and most turbulent segmentum, a former stronghold of the Great Crusade now engulfed in constant war against both Chaos and Xenos. Each segmentum was governed by a segmentum command, headquartered in a massive fortress world with its own battle fleet, space marine chapters, and imperial guard regiments tasked with defending its territories and regulating trade. Originally designed to coordinate the Great Crusade's vast fleets, these command structures had evolved into indispensable administrative bodies overseeing countless subsectors, systems, and planets. With the warp's unpredictability making real-time communication impossible across vast distances, the Imperium was forced to delegate significant autonomy to planetary governors. As long as these rulers paid their tithes to Terra, maintained the imperial creed, and remained loyal to the Emperor, the Imperium did not interfere in their governance. But betrayal was met with swift and brutal retribution. Terra would spare no expense to crush rebellious worlds, making examples of traitors to deter others. A strategy of deterrence that kept most planetary governors in line, if not out of loyalty, then out of fear. In the early 35th millennium, this delicate balance was shattered by a catastrophic colonial rebellion. On the world of Constantirio in the Segmentum Pacificus, a faction known as the New Terra Conclave seized power, renaming the planet New Terra and declaring complete independence from the Imperium. Boldly, they claimed sovereignty over the entire Segmentum Pacificus, rallying discontented worlds to their cause. What made this rebellion particularly dangerous was the Imperium's failure to crush it quickly. Instead, the conflict dragged on for 900 years, spiraling into a galaxy spanning civil war that spread to the Segmentum Obscurus and Segmentum Tempestus. This era became known to imperial historians as the Age of Two Emperors, or the New Terra period, and all records of it were strictly controlled by the Holy Ordos of the Inquisition, tasked with combating chaos corruption. Rumors circulated of a mysterious giant, cloaked and armed with a sword and twin pistols, leading the New Terra Conclave, but his identity remained a closely guarded secret. It was not until the end of the 35th millennium that the Imperium, led by the Dark Angels chapter, finally destroyed New Terra. But in a controversial move, the Dark Angels seized the rebellion's leaders and took them into secret custody, refusing to hand them over to the Inquisition for judgment. The aftermath of the rebellion was profound. Trust between the segmentums eroded, and the Segmentum Pacificus, once a loyal region, became the most neglected segmentum in the Imperium, its worlds receiving fewer resources and less military support than others, a punishment that lingered well into the 41st millennium. The fall of New Terra was merely the beginning of the Imperium's descent into darkness. The 36th millennium would bring an even greater crisis, the Age of Apostasy, the most devastating civil war humanity had faced since the horusheresy. The ecclesiarchy, which had once helped stabilize the Imperium after the Beast Wars, had grown unchecked, its power expanding to rival that of the High Lord's Council. Corrupt cardinals and zealots twisted the imperial creed, diverting the people's faith from the emperor to their own greedy ambitions. What began as subtle heresy soon erupted into open rebellion as the ecclesiarchy's military arm, the Fratres Templar, turned its weapons on loyal imperial forces. At the center of this chaos stood Goga Vandir, the Lord Militant of the ecclesiarchy, a power-hungry tyrant who declared himself the ruler of Holy Terra. Using the Fratres Templar and his control over the ecclesiarchy's vast resources, Vandir purged the High Lord's Council, executing those who opposed him and installing loyalists in their place. His reign of terror was marked by mass executions, religious persecution, and the corruption of imperial institutions. Even the Adeptus Sororitas, originally founded as the Daughters of the Emperor to protect the ecclesiarchy, were divided, with many joining Vandir's forces out of loyalty to the Church, while others remained loyal to the Emperor. Vandir's downfall came at the hands of Sebastian Thor, a humble preacher from the world of Delphos. Thor, inspired by visions of the Emperor, began a crusade of his own, rallying loyalists, Imperial Guard regiments, Space Marine chapters, and dissident Adeptus Sororitas to his cause. His message of returning faith to the Emperor, not to corrupt clerics, resonated across the Imperium, and his forces grew into a mighty army. The final battle for Terra was a bloodbath, as Thor's loyalists clashed with Vandir's Frateres Templar in the streets of the Imperial Palace. In the end, Vandir was assassinated by a Vindicare assassin, and Thor was hailed as a hero. He reformed the ecclesiarchy, limiting its military power and restoring the Emperor's central role in the Imperial Creed. The Adeptus Sororitas, now reborn as the Sisters of Battle, were officially recognized as a military order tasked with defending the faith and combating heresy. But the age of apostasy left deep scars on the Imperium. Billions had died, worlds had been destroyed, and trust in imperial institutions had been shattered. The ecclesiarchy, though reformed, remained a powerful and sometimes problematic force, while the High Lord's Council was forced to implement stricter checks and balances to prevent future tyranny. Meanwhile, Chaos had exploited the Civil War, launching new raids and expanding its influence in the Segmentum Obscurus. Abaddon the Despoiler, watching from the Eye of Terror, saw the Imperium's weakness and prepared his next Black Crusade, one that would strike at the heart of humanity's empire. As the 36th millennium gave way to the 37th, the Imperium faced new threats. The Tyranid hive fleet behemoth emerged from the eastern fringe, consuming dozens of worlds before being defeated at the Battle of Macragge by the Ultramarines. The Ork Wa of Gazkul Thraka began to grow, threatening to engulf the Segmentum Tempestus. The Eldar, a dying race clinging to survival, launched hit-and-run raids on Imperial worlds, seeking to prevent future cataclysms foreseen in their runes. And Abaddon, undeterred by his previous failures, launched his fifth Black Crusade, seizing the strategically vital world of Cadia, a fortress world that guarded the entrance to the Eye of Terror. Though the Imperium eventually reclaimed Cadia, the cost was staggering, and the world's defenses were permanently weakened. Through all these crises, the Imperium endured, sustained by its faith in the Emperor, its vast military might, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. The Age of Iron, the Age of Two Emperors, and the Age of Apostasy had tested the Imperium to its limits, but each time it had risen from the ashes, stronger if not wiser. As the 41st millennium dawned, the Imperium stood on the brink of annihilation, beset by chaos, xenos, and internal strife. But for the Space Marines, the Imperial Guard, the Adeptus Sororitas, and all loyal servants of the Emperor, there was no retreat, no surrender. The long war continued, and humanity's fate hung in the balance, its survival dependent on courage, faith, and the willingness to fight and die for the Emperor and the Imperium of Man. Abaddon, now older and more powerful than ever, continued to launch Black Crusades, each more devastating than the last. His 13th Black Crusade, the most ambitious of all, would see the fall of Cadia, the opening of the Great Rift, a galaxy-spanning warp storm that split the Imperium in two, and the return of the Primarch Robut Guilliman, resurrected from his deathless sleep to lead humanity in its darkest hour. But that is a story for another time, a chapter in the Imperium's long and turbulent history that would define the fate of the galaxy for millennia to come. For now, as the age of apostasy faded into memory and the shadows of the 41st millennium lengthened, the Imperium stood firm, its armies ready to face whatever horrors the warp and the galaxy beyond could unleash. The long war raged on, and humanity's struggle for survival continued, one battle, one world, one life at a time.